Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. My name is Neil Murphy. I'm Senior Business Architect with DeeperThanBlue, and we've titled this webinar, this meeting, Basics to Business Impact, and it's quite a range. We're hoping to cover quite a range of information, really to get you started on your AI journey. Great and interesting to see that some of you had quite a bit of engagement there and some positive sentiment to start with. But we're going to cover on, we're going to touch on the state of the AI market, what some of the key vendors are offering. We're not going to be doing a deep dive into all of the options. We've only got about 40 minutes really to cover all of this stuff, but we will use some of the vendor offerings to illustrate what's available in the market, and also get into some of the key things to consider when you're looking at some of the choices that are available. And then finally, we'll get into some of the project opportunities for AI and how it can be implemented into your organisation, and give you some examples of some of the work that we've done. So let's crack on. Let's get into this. So just interesting seeing the feedback, because actually it's in common with what we're seeing from across the marketplace there at the moment, and generally people's attitudes are quite a wide spectrum. So on one hand here at the top left, we've got people who are terrified of missing out. You know, they want to know how AI is going to affect their business model and what kind of threats they're up against. And if you're in any kind of tech related piece, you've probably got the board saying, what are you doing about AI? And, you know, are we getting all over this? And then down at the other end, we've got people who are just absolutely sick of hearing about all this. They've got the whole Samuel L. Jackson meme going around and doing the rounds again, about being completely fed up with this. Incidentally, it's 30 years old now, which made me feel quite old when I heard that. But there we go. I'm still using it. But in the middle, we've got a lot of people who are really sort of sitting there saying, okay, right, so what? Right? I hear a lot about this, but I want to see some value. I want to see something actually that we can put in place. And the general impression we've seen is that people are a bit overwhelmed with all of the information. Part of this, I think, is because the media just love it. The vendors in this space are pouring a fortune into the technology, and the stock prices are all over the place. Just look at Nvidia, for instance, a good example. But a lot of those vendors are under pressure now to show some value and really get into the so what area and demonstrate some value. And that's our approach. We really want to focus on things that can make a difference to your business and start to move things across. And that's really how we've tried to couch this in terms of information you need in order to get started. So there's a lot of things out there in the news. Things like this. Let me just play this quickly. This is quite an old example, really, but again, it's controversial, cool, creepy.
So, sometimes nothing happens, and sometimes everything happens all at once, and you just gotta deal with it. And it's also...
So you've just got a line of text, you've got a still image, and then you've got an audio clip, and you can make this, this sort of deep fake type thing occur. And this is a lot of the stuff we see all over the media. But in reality, this is not a lot of the business applications for AI. It's not the things that are going to assist a lot of people's business models. However, that's what people are seeing across the board. And I think this is what's leading to people feeling overwhelmed. So let's try and steer away from that, and we'll stick with things that are a bit more specific. The other thing that's not helping, that's adding to the confusion, is that now everything is called AI. Even stuff that we used to call machine learning and analytics is now being widely described as being predictive AI, which is not helpful, really. So up on the left, predictive AI. Discriminative AI is the stuff that was almost like more of a traditional AI, where we used to train a model based on a labeled set of data to identify where the boundary was. So here, example, can you tell the difference between a dog and a cat? But again, that's the more sort of traditional discriminative AI. And then down here on the right, we've got generative AI. So this is an example of, there's a tool called Stable Diffusion you might have come across or seen. And all I did here was say, give me a picture of a black spaniel playing in a river, clicked on cinematic, and this is the image that was generated. So anything that's about creating new content, generating new content, is generative AI. So I'm going to quickly go through these because I know it can get a bit dry, but generative, just general information that's good to have in your back pocket when you're getting into these conversations with vendors and other people and internal businesses. So generative AI we've covered. Foundation models. So you'll hear this term. Think about this as being the underlying data structure, where you've got lots of information and content, but they don't necessarily have the ability to communicate with other humans. Anybody who's worked in IT for any length of time might know people who share some of these characteristics. But what gets in the middle there are large language models. So you can think about those as being the smart intermediaries that can handle that communication on your behalf. So you can ask questions, get responses in the way a human might do that. A new one that's, well, relatively new one is you'll see this term multimodal. So now we've got large multimodal models, and that just means it's not just text. It might be the ability to deal with speech or images and other forms of engagement, other pieces. So you'll see that expression as well. When you interact with one of these large language models, that's prompting. So asking it questions, interacting with what you do on ChatGPT, you're asking it questions, you're prompting. And an extension of that is something that you'll hear prompt engineering, which is just about structuring the questions in such a way that you get the best response. It's not really technical. It can take some trial and error, and it's really just about how you get the best from the model.
We'll show a few examples of that.
We'll show some, yeah. And then in terms of poor prompting, if you're asking things in the wrong way, that can lead to something you'll hear described as hallucination. In the US, I think the abbreviation is BS. And again, in the election season, we've seen quite a lot of that recently. So a few examples out there. But things that come back from the models that sound really quite credible, but are totally made up. So you can restrict that creative behavior. You might not always want to. If you're auditing somebody's accounts, you probably do want to restrict that. If you're doing something that's a bit more about ideation or creativity, then probably not. So again, it's a balance. You'll see something else, RAG, which I always thought was red, amber, green. I have to get that out of my head now, but this again, a long term for this retrieval augmented generation. But what this is saying, I'm going to ask you a question. Can you use this data in order to form your answers? And that might be a couple of PDF files, or it might be access to your back-end enterprise data, but it's just saying, look, base your answers on this stuff. And then
we're going to demonstrate those.
We'll show some examples of those as well. And then in terms of when you get to things like fine-tuning, this is where you're getting into a bit more bespoke operation and tuning some of the models to meet your specific requirements. Starts to get a bit more expensive, starts to get a lot more specific in terms of the use cases that you're trying to put in place. And again, in the old days, the graphic that I've put up there alongside, again, just to try and bring this home. On the left, the kind of traditional AI model, we'd have a particular task in mind. We'd train an algorithm or a model based on some data in order to perform that task. Whereas now what we're talking about is having a model in place that we might use for a whole variety of tasks. It might be something that a whole range of use cases that we might use, from summarization to triage. And again, you can prompt and get those responses. It's a lot more agile in terms of how those things work. So I've just stuck this IBM model up there just as an example. Just
as a point to add to this, from our follow-up from this session, we'll share with you access to a cheat sheet about all of these terms, won't we? So we've got a PDF that we'll share with everybody.
Yeah, we can
after the session ends. So look out for that. It'll be coming out on email with a number of other pieces of valuable information.
Okay, so look, just using that as an example, really, as a way of. Okay, so these are some of the questions that we see all the time in our meetings. In fact, all of our meetings, whether it's AI or otherwise, we're based in Yorkshire. So how much is this all going to cost is generally question number one, how much. The second thing people want to know is where's my data going to end up? And then finally, can I trust it? Can I believe what's going on? So how much is it all going to cost is quite complicated. I'll come on to that. What's happened to my data? Does it leave the building? Is it used to train existing models or external models? And then what are my options? And then finally, can I trust it? Can I make, in terms of making decisions? What we're looking for is transparency and clarity and traceability. We want to understand how decisions are being made by these models and based on what data. And I think just this final picture here, anybody who doubts the power of AI just has to look at this picture here on the right, because the two running images, the one on the right is how I think I look when I'm out running, but the one on the left is the grim reality, the terrible truth. But again, this is something created using the same black spaniel playing in a river model, stable diffusion. I put that picture in said cinematic, and this is what it came up with. Now, you know, looking beyond the hair and the muscles, if you look at some of the other decisions that are being made here, first of all, quite cleverly, it's realised that of all the sports, this is running, so I'll put the runner on a track. It's decided that the blue image in the background isn't a passing wheelie bin, it's another runner who seems to be taking a shortcut, but it's put that in the background as well, and that's all very clever. But then it's also made a decision that Nike should be the logo on the shirt, and Adidas should be the logo on the shorts.
They're the brands in favour, are they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, why has it decided that? You know, why has it come up with those as being the things that runners wear? So again, this sort of makes you start to think about how the model that's underpinning this stuff has all been trained, how it's making those kind of decisions. And this comes back to trust and transparency. You know, we need to understand how those decisions are being made. So if we just moving on in terms of those large language models and how you compare those things, there are various things you can look at in terms of performance and capability. You know, performance, how quickly does it respond? What kind of size and scale is it? Capabilities, what kind of languages does it support? Can it do that whole multimodal stuff? Can it deal with text and speech and images, or is it just text? The training data, you know, training data is an interest. Generally, in the early days of this stuff, the vendors used to always boast about the size of the model and how many parameters the model had been trained on. You know, I think ChatGPT is up to like 1.8 trillion, which I can't even get my head around what that actually means. It's just so vast. And they're actually at the point now where they're not really publishing that stuff anymore. It's generally done on estimates. But the size of the model and how it is trained can be valuable, can be useful to know, but again, it comes down to use case as to whether or not that's actually something that's necessary. A couple of other things to cover. I'm not going to go through all of these. We're going to cover some of all these in coming slides, but context window. Think about that as being working memory, or how much of a document you could keep in your head while you're reading it, so that you don't necessarily have to keep going skimming back, and you can make decisions as you're doing those creations. So a big context window gives a lot more power in terms of that kind of creativity. But again, might not necessarily be helpful in a specific use case. But again, just from that. And then weights and biases are the things that are important to you in the decision making that you're asking the model to do. So again, you can sort of start to tune and push those things in one direction or another. I've included this in play. This is the LLM chatbot arena. If you Google that, you'll come across this. It's a nice way of being able to compare some of these models. It's you can select one or two, put some prompts in there and see how they deal with them. Some of these models are better at dealing with chat, for instance, and that kind of human interaction. Others are good for image creation, and they all have certain strong points. But this is a nice resource to be able to go and compare and contrast.
We'll share that link on the follow-up email, so you can have a bit of a play yourself.
Yeah, go and have a look at that. In fact, some of this content I've taken from other places, and like this is an example where I've quoted the source at the bottom, so you can go and have a look. But again, when you're comparing one model with another, be aware that they're generally going to give you a good view as to, they're going to look at it from their own point of view. There are some sort of global parameters now that you'll see across there in the market. So some examples here about like undergraduate level knowledge. And what you often see are things like this, where this one's from Anthropic, who produce Claud, and they're telling you how wonderful their model is, and then they're probably choosing some suitable comparisons in order to demonstrate that value. But they all do this, they all do it in the same way. Again, the link's on there, so you can go and examine some of these things in a bit more detail. There are some other terms in here: 3-shot, 0-shot. Generally, that all relates to how much information you give the model in order to make a decision. So again, it depends on your use case, how viable some of those things are, or some of those measures are. But again, going on to capabilities and what things are capable of, this is an example from Claud. I'm just going to play this for you as a bit of a demonstration. Claud is really good. One of the things it's really good at is interacting with graphics. So here's a use case where, as ever, somebody's got to give a lecture to a presentation tomorrow. I've got a couple of pictures here. Can you pull the data from these images and drop that into a standardized form, let's say JSON, which is a bit like a CSV file, really. So go and create me a JSON file, and that's what it's doing here. It's reading from that image and interpreting that and dropping that data into a file. And it's going to go and get that from the first one, and then it's going to go to the second one. And now what I want you to do is, can you combine that data? Oh, and then what I want you to do is to create a bit of JavaScript for me that creates a nice file that I can then use in my presentation. So now it's going to go take those two files, create a bit of JavaScript, which will effectively create a presentation, which I can then drop into my presentation. As you can see, that's what it's done here now. So very quickly, 2 images, you can drop that in now, and you can go on to add additional content. But again, not all models are capable of doing that kind of thing. It just seems to be one of the things that Claude has specialized in. So again, another link here. You can look at some of these models in additional detail. But the point I wanted to make here was that, again, multimodal, that term coming up. It's a comparison here between some of these larger. It's not definitive, this, and there are other things that we're going to come on to. But just in terms of the way in which you access these models. Now, ChatGPT was a firm favourite in the survey early on, and Copilot. So that's your sort of chatbot interaction. The alternative is an API-based approach where an application in the back end may be referring to one of these models in order to support a business process. So it's a different form of interaction. It's maybe not user-driven in the same way, or there may be something between you and the model, but different ways of doing it. And that's important when we get onto discussions about cost. As I said, this is Yorkshire, right? We get into this pretty early. So here's an example from GPT. They price all this stuff differently depending on the model. On the top left there is the most advanced model, and you can see it's about input and output. You can think about this almost like a mobile phone contract, how much data is going in, how much data is going out, and they'll charge you accordingly. So you can see the top left there, $2.50 per million tokens, whereas in the middle and then down to the smaller token here, GPT-4o Mini, it's a lot cheaper. It's 15 cents for 1 million tokens. But in many cases, the GPT-4 Mini might be just what you need. You might not need all the power of the biggest, greatest model.
Yeah. So I think that's the learning, isn't it, Neil?
It absolutely
Different
is.
applications don't always need the biggest model.
They don't, and also, as we'll get into, you don't. The model can be hosted in different places, and you may end up paying different prices. Something else to consider, we talked about fine-tuning earlier. If you do get into tuning these models, you're going to incur additional cost. If you're not using it off the shelf as it's designed and you're doing some specific tuning, it generally has to be hosted in a slightly different way that incurs additional cost, and you'll have more money to pay. But again, that's the big end of things, really. There's a lot you can do before you get into having to fine-tune a model. On the other end of things, and again, some of the tools that are probably more familiar on the call, ChatGPT is a free version. That might be what people are currently using. You can pay $20 a month and get more capability, access to better models, the ability to ask more questions on a daily basis. Copilot, the Microsoft equivalent, and Gemini from Google work in a very similar kind of thing. It's a subscription based. There's a free version. You might find as a starting point that those things work out for you. Quick point on privacy. Some of these assistants are collecting your conversations, location feedback, usage, all of this good stuff. That might not be a problem for you, depending on the industry you work in, and again, for the use case. This applies to some of the free things. I would imagine a lot of the free things are collecting a lot of information. There's no such thing as free.
No.
So be careful and look out for that. If you do get into a subscription piece, then things tend to get better. This is the Microsoft. Microsoft are really good around this stuff. They're not using your training data, your data for training their models. There's a whole piece around the privacy models that you've probably already committed to, and all bits. Lots of reassurance here about transparency and how your data is being used. However, you can opt in and opt out of the use cases there. So read the small print, understand what you're getting into, and make sure you've checked the right boxes around some of those privacy pieces. Some other vendors like IBM are using the whole protection and governance piece as a bit of a selling point, right? So they're modeling what the model is up to and how things are being used and interpreted. And again, this might be quite attractive if that whole governance piece is something you're interested in.
And they explain how the model's been trained and the data pile that it's been trained on.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yeah. It's there's the different approaches from different vendors. Open source is an option. Check out huggingface.co. It's a repository for lots of open source models that you're free to take and use. There's no licensing fee. You can use community support, so you can reduce down costs like in the good old open source way. You might get into additional costs because there are possibly less options around flexibility around hosting and where you deploy those things. So in some cases that might work well for you. But if you want that ultimate level of control and ownership, this is a good option to consider, and we'll leave a bit more investigation. But I'm going to move on to what some of the vendors are doing, give you a couple of examples. I'm going to start with the Microsoft Copilot piece. I know that a few people mentioned that they were using Copilot, but the version I want to show you here is what Microsoft are doing within Office 365. So here's an example where I've got a very long email, which I'm sure Kai's taken a long time to craft, but I haven't got time to read all that. So I'm going to ask Copilot to summarize that for me. Give me the key points, give me the key actions, things that I need to consider. And there's a nice summary. Yeah, they want me to get involved in an event. We've got this thing going on, and can I provide some assistance? So I'm going to respond to that. I'm drafting it with Copilot. Yeah, basically I'm fine and I'm happy. So draft me something with that. And it's come up with this, which it's a bit RoboCop. Can I make it a bit more casual? Can I come up with something that's a bit more informative? Right, I've got your email. I'm getting involved in the silent auction. I'm gonna, yeah, got that. But they might want some help with the flyer. I'm quite good with the flyer, so I'll ask to add this in a bit. So, do you need any help? Let's so give me another version of that email where I'm asking to help with the flyer as well. It's creating a little draft for me now. And there we go. Do you need any help with the flyers added on the end? I've got some experience of this. Right, great. Okay, let's keep that. Let's send it. And yeah, that's me done. Very quick. Okay, so what they're aiming at is productivity enhancements here. Little bits of time here and there, savings. So I want to draft a new email now. So I'll write an email about another fundraising opportunity here. I'm going to do a 5K run. There's a lot of running in this preso, yeah. To raise some money. You guys got any experience of helping out with this? And I'll put something together based on that. So right, here we go. I've got an idea. Community event benefit. I think it'd be a good opportunity to bring the community together. Look forward to it. Right, I quite like the sound of that. Quite happy with that. That's fine. So yeah, I'm going to keep that. Before I send it, let's just see if I've missed anything. So I'll just get some coaching. So I'll ask Copilot to help me out. It's looking at the tone, it's coming up with some suggestions. It's I'm nearly there. Okay, right, so it's looking at the tone and it thinks that I could maybe convey a bit more excitement. Let's yeah, okay, I'm going to change it. How about I'm thrilled to share an idea. Now clearly these folks have never been to Yorkshire. We don't do that enthusiasm bit quite so much. So yeah, thanks Copilot, but I think I'm good with my original version here. What's it saying about sentiment? Now put this in and show some more respect. I admire your passion. Oh no, I don't think so. No, but thanks again. What about clarity? Anything else I've missed? What do you think? All right, well maybe I should put in here an idea about where this is actually going to happen. Yeah, that seems very sensible. I've clearly missed that. All right, I was thinking that Pine Street would be a good location. Okay, good stuff. I'll take that on board. I've finished crafting that email. I've taken some advice. So, again, it's productivity. It's saving me some time. Maybe it saved me a couple of cycles because they would have come back immediately and said, where's this all going to happen, or what do you think about that? So again, it's taking time out from the point of view of creativity, but also in terms of what it delivers. This is the chat version that you might have seen of Copilot. Again, you can interact with this. We're asking it for ideas about running this. This might be where we got the idea from for a 5K run in the first place. I can ask about community events. And what's happening here is as you can see from the top left, it's going out to the web and it's getting ideas from the web and that kind of content. And you can see the little references, the numbers that are in there where it's telling me where it's getting each of these components from. But when we, if I'm just going to move this ahead actually, because the interesting bit I find is here at this point. So now what we're doing, you see the little switch has changed at the top. We're looking at work. So now what's happening is I'm looking through emails that might be relevant for who organised the last fundraiser, and maybe there's some work already been done that I can make use of. And it's found a suspect. Mario Rogers did some work on this beforehand, and now, well, okay, where's the slide deck that we used to use? Because I don't want to start that from scratch. Just go and see where that is. So now it's looking at the data that I've got available to, or I've got access to, and it's trawling through those things, and well, yeah, okay, here it is. It's going to find that for me. I can then just open that and make use of it, and saves me starting to create one of those things from scratch. So a lot of work needed behind the scenes there in terms of making sure that you've got your access pieces taken care of and your security model is in place, because there's a lot of, whether anybody wants to admit it, security by obscurity. And when you start putting these tools in place, it might open up a few things that you might not have been aware of. Another note of caution on this approach: it can be a really fast way to get the board off your back, because you can say, yeah, we're using AI in our organization to deploy it quickly. But those $30 a month, which you pay for the subscription for Copilot and 365, they add up, and you're going to be paying for people who are not using it. And also the value can be hard to measure. Those minutes are saved, are quite difficult to track. So it's very important when you start with these things to think about who's using this, what they're using it for, and if that is necessarily the best tool to deliver all of those values. You know, if this is your approach, start small, identify some key deliverables and measure the outcomes, and don't be tempted just to throw this over the wall and see how people get on with it. That can be a very expensive option. Just moving on to Amazon. Amazon have got almost a department store approach to this. So they've got lots of large language models, third-party models, open source models. They've got a couple of their own that are in there. Their approach here is generally, I think, is a bit more developer focused. When you look at the environment and you look at the documentation, that's the target market. And the point to consider, I think, with the vendor is what they're tending to do is to try and bring people to their core offering. So from the Microsoft side of things, they want people to get into using Office, and here's an additional reason to do that. The Amazon approach here is, look, a lot of your data might reside in our environment, and this might make it a great place for you to start. So, you know, maybe we can incorporate that into some of these AI services. And that's their approach. Google do something similar with their model garden. They've got this environment called Vertex, which has a range of tools. And again, they lead with their own large language models, but they also put some open source stuff in there and some third-party pieces. They've got a Copilot type tool, which they call Gemini. I think it was in the media some time back. It was called Bard, and it wasn't that great, and it's been rebranded, and it is a lot better.
It's all come under the Gemini brand, and it works with their workspace tool, which is, you know, the equivalent of Office 365 and Copilot, isn't it?
Yeah. So in that case, when you're looking at those tools, it's about, again, raising subscriptions, making people use their workspace environment, or wanting people to use those things. And a bit of a shout out, IBM have not really come up much. So you don't see a lot of news on the IBM side of things, because generally they're not involved in any of that kind of consumer focused stuff, and they don't tend to get in the news as much. But they've been at this for years. I mean, there's a quote here from Gary Kasparov, I think that's 1996, when they were doing some of this early deep blue stuff around their models, you know, taking on chess champions and things. Their approach has been to be very much business focused, and they've tried to do this from the point of view of removing barriers to adoption. So you want complete transparency across their models, including all the data they've used. And what they do is, rather than simply pointing a model at the internet to train it, or using a whole raft of data, they've been very specific about the data that their granite models have been trained on, and they've been cleansed. So there's no profanity, there's no hate speech, there's no IP or GDPR stuff. So you're less likely to get into trouble. It's also been tailored for that sort of enterprise need. So what you tend to find is, even though the models might not be as big, they're very business specific and actually can perform really well against when you compare them to things like GPT-4, you know, and some of those other pieces.
I think in these cases as well, as an organisation, as an enterprise, you get your own instance of this, so that when you interact with it, your data is safe. That's an absolutely fundamental attribute, isn't it?
It can, yeah,
of this approach.
Absolutely, and that's clearly the kind of business case that they're targeting at. I'll put my hand. I quite like this approach. My background's been in healthcare and pharmaceuticals and finance, so any of that kind of steering clear of the consumer bit and focusing on reducing risk is getting my vote. Really, it's a nice place to start.
It's AI for business. At the end of the day.
That has been it. So again, you might start with some of the other tools. You might use those tools to identify use cases, but when you come across something that's specific and you want a bit more control about it, then this might be a way to move. So you don't have to just pick one. You know, you can start with one and migrate or move or base it on the specific use case. So that was a quick highlights tour. How are we doing for time?
We're good.
All right. So what I want to do here is show you a few examples of some of the things that we've done internally. It's about getting runs on the board at this stage. There's been lots of talk and lots of discussion about how and when and where. We think areas like customer experience and supporting experts and putting information in the right hands is a great way to do some early adoption. And I want to show you a couple of things that we've worked on over the past few months. Clearly, the important thing here is cats.
So everyone loves a cat.
Everyone loves a cat.
That's my cat.
Got to get a cat in there. That's Stephen's cat. And you might have seen some of the shameless plugging we did earlier in the year when we had a bit of fun with the Euros. We built a machine learning model to do predictions, and then we were trying to see whether cats can compete with AI, which clearly they can't. Netherlands, no, never stood a chance in that game. But we had some fun with that. We got the cat to do some predictions. We built a machine learning model in order to machine learning model in order to do predictions, and then later on we built Harry, the AI-driven football pundit, where we could ask him lots of questions, and we gave him examples of what a pundit would look like. Again, a lot of base material to say, make it sound like this. And again, we had some fun with it. We were able to get it to answer questions. And the interesting thing I think around this is that integration between different types of AI. Yeah, how you can use your predictive AI or your machine learning models to interact, but you can also overlay that with something that has a specific tone and voice that might be what you're looking for in a specific use case or reflects your organization. We then went on to lots of the use cases I've shown already generally tend to be, and lots of the stuff you see generally tends to be kind of office space, white collar examples. But, experts come in all shapes and sizes, and some of the blue collar examples seem to resonate quite well with us. Some early people we spoke to wanted tools that would allow engineers to access large amounts of information and quickly be able to respond to an issue. So here's an example we put together based on a gas boiler. This happens all the time, every February when your boiler breaks. So here's the engineer out on the road, wants to know what the next call is. They could be doing this on a cell phone, just using here we're using the Watsonx assistant. There's your next call, let me know when you get there. All right, I'm here. Any more questions you want with the boiler? Any questions? How do I replace the O-rings, which seem to be responsible for the problem? Yeah, how do I? These ones look a bit old and a bit worn, and you can see the information that's been used here is coming from the back end system. Here we're using Jira to provide that, and I want some guidelines about how I replace these O-rings, and that's been provided to me now. Here's a 3-step process for how you can make those changes. Let me know if you need any further assistance.
I could have done with this earlier in the week with our oven's broken down.
Okay.
And the engineer came in and said, "Have you got your manual?" And it took me half an hour to find that. And
that's exactly the use case. Often they show up and, there's hundreds of boilers out there. They don't know what the error codes mean. They have to start Googling that stuff and looking at these pieces. But there we go. We're now interacting. It's just natural language. Any other pieces that you want to ask? No? Right. So now what it's doing is also the other thing the engineer doesn't like, which is writing up a summary of this so that it can go back into the Jira system, so that next time an engineer comes out, they know what the history is with this boiler. So it's created a summary asking if it's happy. You happy with this? Shall we submit this? Can we add this into the summary? Well, no, I'm not happy with this because there's a couple of other details that we need to add. What is it? Okay, so that error code. So mention that the error code is now gone, and the boiler still stinks of fags. Okay, well, that might not be the language that we want to use. So, but I'll take that on board, and the model is now going to redo the summary where it's adding the bottom of the boiler is emitting a strong, unpleasant odor reminiscent of cigarette smoke. That's more like it. That's a reasonable piece, and it's talked about the smell of cigarettes and those other pieces. Right? Yes, I'm happy with that now. And that summary is now being sent to Jira and put in, and the next time an engineer is on their way out, they'll see that additional content has been created. So again, think about this in terms of using AI in order to put information in the hands of decision makers. And here's another. This is I don't know. This is blue collar in the bluest of blue. So this is a policing example, but it's really about mobilizing resources at short notice. So here's an example of being in a situation where very quickly you need to get some people on the ground in order to deal with an emergency situation. So what we're seeing here is a resource coordinator, again using a chat. An AI-driven chat agent to interact and get some information out to a whole body of users. In this case, for instance, this example, we're trying to communicate with 3,000 officers to see who's available to respond to an emergency situation.
Just set some context. This is largely driven by some of the recent riots, isn't it?
Well, that's a great use case for it. We were actually discussing this beforehand, but what used to happen with this is that somebody would send out a message with that information and then get thousands of responses that had to be coordinated. What we're now seeing is that the model can be used to say, right, what kind of questions do you want to send out? And in this case, we're saying, are you a first aider and a dog handler? We need to know that for some reason. And we can now go through a situation of testing that message to see what it's going to look like when it goes out. But this is going to get sent out through SMS because, again, the people that you're trying to communicate with are not on site, they're not using your app or your technology, and it's just a really nice way of being able to engage. So this is what the officers on the ground would receive. There's been a train crash, this is when it started, how quickly can you get here? I can get here in 2 hours, great, okay. Next question, whereabouts are you going to report to? Well, I'm going to report to Barnsley, which isn't actually in that list, but the application knows that one of those places in Penistone is in Barnsley. Are you a first aider? Yes, I am. Are you a dog handler? We're obviously going to do a lot of, I don't know what we're going to do with these pieces. Here's a summary. Does this represent your status? Yes, it does. That now gets submitted. Now, it's a very simple use case. However, that now means that 3,000 people could respond simultaneously. That single event coordinator is not sitting there waiting and interpreting those things. They can look at the data when it arrives is very well structured, so it can be shared on dashboards, on reports and on alerts, and also can be used in terms of understanding how that event can be managed on an ongoing basis. Now this is policing. It would work very well in hospitality. We're talking to a hospitality company at the moment who are interested in adopting this. Again, for covering shift rotas when somebody phones in sick, and we now need to do that. And we can integrate this into your back-end enterprise data, so we can pull in that rostering system and that service. It could be anything around supply chain logistics where you want to make a quick change. Yeah, I need a new driver, I need a new pallet, the power's gone off, I need to move some stuff around because the air conditioning means these things are going to come out of stock. Lots of things lots of use cases that can relate to those pieces. I'm moving quite quickly here, but this is sort of the good stuff. Again, just another little use case here about customer interaction. Okay, I ordered a glazed door for my kitchen. So again, this is DeeperThanBlue do a lot of work on e-commerce. So we quite like these use case examples. But what we're showing here is, again, somebody's placed a request in the chat window, the system and the services being able to go to the back end to BigCommerce in this case and find out the latest on that option and put all that information back into that AI-driven assistant window. You know, you don't need to necessarily interact with the website in order to ask that question. You know, that's how.
It also opens up where the website isn't taking the orders. If people are going across other channels like branches, stores, that you can effectively talk to those other back office systems where e-com isn't the order management piece.
Yeah, and also covers incidents like channel switching, where a customer might have engaged with one model and then show up in your office and you're able to sort of follow those other pieces. So again, it's a really nice way of coordinating data from multiple sources and then being able to present that and put that in the hands of decision makers. So here's another example we're looking at from someone interacting with a website and saying, look, I'm making a patio. Okay, great. Now, what's nice here is that the window, the agent window, is able to interact with the website behind it, so that it's, as well as answering the questions, it's actually navigating you around and putting that content in front. So I want to use natural stone, so it brings up all the natural stone options. And now I've decided, well, I think grey is probably what we're looking for. I think that's what we're going to do. So very quickly then, I've got all the natural stone options. I've got some of them in grey. It's even brought up some grey pieces where the grey is in the description, not necessarily the picture. But again, what this means is that you can use the assistant to provide that nice way of engaging with the customer and allow the customer to freely type whatever information that they want or any requests that they've got, and then it's using that information to drive the website behind, which is quite a nice way to work, and again takes out some of the friction from interacting with the customer. So we're practicing what we preach. I'm going to hand this over to Stephen now, actually, because he's generally doing the practicing here. So why don't you tell us about what you're doing with these tools?
Yeah, I think this current event is an example of where we've used AI. So we've used it in a number of places. We used it to help us create the emails for the event. We've used it to create the website content, which we'll have a look at in a minute. I've used it for image creation. So just on this example, you've seen the picture on the top right. I wrote a blog about comparing different AI tools, which we'll share with you. Share a link to it. And basically, I wanted an image. I used Photoshop and Adobe Firefly in there to create an image. And I said to it, please create an image which can be entitled "The Devil in the Detail." So I provided it with a sample image of the style that we tend to use. I want to illustrate something that will place a devil or an evil character in amongst data generated by AI. And within about 30 seconds, it put this and two other options together. And this was the one I chose to accompany the blog post. So we've also used it for things like social media ideation. So, you know, when you're putting a lot of content out, sometimes if you need to do it relatively quickly, you need something that will help you spark those ideas. And we also
removes the blank sheet of paper, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's that starting point. It's never the be all and end all. So you really need to promote. You need to check what you're doing. So the other thing we've done is we've used it for website generation. So we created this. I think it was Chris that wrote this prompt. So we need to create content for a web page of a tech services business. That's us promoting a webinar. That's what we're doing now. About generative AI and how businesses can learn from the benefits and not be afraid or not know where to start with generative AI. And we put this and we said, well, the webinar will explain different stages of Gen AI, major players in the market, and where we want to demonstrate where it's in action.
Shall we show it?
Yeah, so let's show it.
So that's a prompt.
Yeah, so I've used Perplexity here, just for speed. I've basically copied and pasted it into the window, pressed go, and within 2 seconds it starts. We'll just pause it there for a minute, wouldn't it? So it started writing it. What you'll see is, just up here. So I did this a couple of days ago, and that's our logo. So it's found information about generative AI, AI for business on our website and has pulled it through. So previous work that we've done is being pulled through into Perplexity to inform it. So
Context to that is really about gaining confidence about the response that you're reading, isn't it? And whether it's not hallucinating and you can believe it.
Yeah. So it's chucking out all this information. So this is the basis of our web page. If you go back onto the event page, you'll probably go, oh, actually, I recognise a lot of this, the format, the structure. But what we've done is we've taken a lot of the IZEs and changed them to ISEs to anglicise it.
But it gets you 80% of the way.
Yeah, it's 8%. Yeah, and it avoids the blank page. So that's how we tend to use it.
And I think the other important aspect of this is I'm estimating it probably saved us a minimum of 3 hours, and it also allowed us to go out the same day in terms of putting the web page together, getting the emails together, images, social posts, and being able to get that out same day, whereas normally through different cycles, it took us 2 days. So we go to market a lot faster as a result.
And that's really difficult to quantify in terms of value, right? How much value is that worth? So in terms of identifying use cases, we've got a bit of a model that we use when we're working with organizations. We try to break things out. Again, looking at some of the examples we've done, often you're trying to synthesize information and put that into the hands of experts. You're trying to optimize your operational pieces by diverting trivial tasks almost away from key resources. So if you can automate some of those activities and direct them more effectively, that can be a huge saving. There's a lot of routine stuff that takes place, and a lot of the virtual assistant pieces can cover those off. But often triage, being able to respond quickly, that point you just made there about being able to pull things together very quickly in order to respond very, very fast to specific events is pretty key. So we have this SORT model that we use, and again, it's a nice way of working with organizations, looking at their internal processes and trying to get some starting use cases. So in terms of getting started, you look at what ideas you've got, look at the assets that you've got in place and some of the data that you've got available, and look at capabilities and starting points. You can consider some of those use cases. The SORT model works. We prefer small, quick wins rather than Death Star projects. You try and do something that's massive and too ambitious, takes a long time, doesn't deliver. Let's go small, let's go quick wins, and let's deliver some value quite quickly at small scale. That's
what is a small kind of project in terms of proving something out, a proof of value?
I think in terms of the expert support stuff is a nice way to start for a number of reasons. One of them being that you're generally working with your own internal people rather than as a first use case going external, which is tempting because there may be some real value there. But working with an internal project where the data that you're using isn't leaving, the people that are using the tools and services are internal folks, you can maintain quite a lot of control when you're dealing with friends and family, rather than going external and trying to do that as a more ambitious piece. But try and identify the specifics in terms of what the payback is. It's going to be easier to justify your budget when you come and expand these things out. Then try and extend out the first use case to more people, and then try and identify equivalent use cases in other parts of your organization. At that point, you might want to think about whether you're still using the right tool. Right? It could be that you've put something in there that's easy to deploy.
Sure.
Identify something that's specifically delivering a value, but there might be a more cost-effective way of doing that, which is another approach.
I was just going to say, in terms of some of those examples that we demonstrated earlier, the proof of concepts and the client projects, those particular proof of value workshop through to delivery of of code and demonstration
Yeah.
was in the region of 4 to 8 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Depending on which use case we're referring to.
Yeah, we try and get things on the ground very quickly. If you can get something in place, within a month, in terms of demonstrating initial value, proof of concept, and then within sort of 8 to 12 weeks, if you can get something into production.
Yeah, scale it and put it in production.
That would be ideal. Yeah, don't start with the dead start. Do you want to cover this, Chris?
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, we will, after this session, circulate our Getting Started guide that I mentioned earlier. We will be running what we're referring to as Webinar 2. We were looking to get that scheduled for November, so that will move people's understanding forward from today's session. This is Webinar 1. We will look to run this webinar that you're all part of today again in December and in January. So we'd encourage you, if you'd like to share this with colleagues, to get them to register for those. And again, we'll circulate the dates for that after today's event. We are offering to companies an AI readiness executive workshop, and that's typically half a day. It can be on site, but if that's difficult because of hybrid working, we can do it remotely as well. And that will help you work out what the best candidates for applying AI to business processes, whether that be customer experience, customer service, an expert advisor, or another part of the business. It could be finance, could be buying, where we can improve business processes through the use of AI, remove repetitive tasks. So that's an offer that's open to you in terms of, if we can get the executive line of business to a workshop with yourselves, then we can obviously start to get that scheduled and execute. And for organisations that are a little bit more progressed, we have a deeper AI lab where we can start to build out the model into a business, the business case into a model. And it's effectively where we're developing, testing and learning how the application will work real life. But obviously there's a bit more qualification about moving into that process, and it's for organisations that are ready to move to that stage. A lot of organisations we're finding are still at the AI readiness, so the workshop's absolutely appropriate for organisations.
But we can quickly move from one to the other.
Absolutely.
We've got a reasonable use case. You've got access to your data. You've got the right security and governance in place.
Then we can move into build.
We can get into that at that point.